Okay, so let's get started with week 6.1, talking about inquiry-based learning. So here's the agenda, and today we're going to be talking about inquiry-based learning or problem-based learning, PBL. So there are a lot of different ways that we kind of a lot of different things that we call this. We're going to focus today on problem-based learning, which is one of the different forms of inquiry-based learning. I'm not going to go into all the different kinds. This is the one that we're choosing to focus on today because we think that it has great potential and very engaging for students, and something that we're going to actually try within our class. So by the time that you finish this class, you'll actually have an example where you'll come up with a driving question for problem-based learning, and you'll come up with like kind of ways that you can use technology or a hook or a grabber, different idea to get the kids engaged in your particular problem. And then you'll come up with a culminating activity at the end, which is basically going to be like a form of assessment. But by the end of this week, by the end of week 6, you should have come up with 3 questions or problems by the end of this week. So let's talk, we're going to go through each one of these today. We're going to talk a little bit about PBL. You already watched the videos and you read the article, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of background information. We're going to talk about PBL and dilemma problem solving and design problem solving, and then we're going to go through an example in the on Wednesday or on the second part of this week. All right, so first let's start out with an introduction to problem-based learning. So let's start out with talking about what did you think? So you watched a set of videos, you read an article, and you responded to a set of different questions. I might bring in different students' responses here. So maybe if you look at the class preps and find different things that were interesting, hopefully they say like, oh yeah, I really thought that, you know, if I had had this problem, it would be more interesting in my social studies class. It was a high school social studies class. Again, make sure that you watch the videos before this class and look at your students' class preps before you come here. So I might ask them questions like, what did you think? Did you experience anything like PBL in your own learning? What happened? What was it like? Again, talking to them about why were they so immersed in this? Why was it so interesting? And then ask for different feedback things. So, oh, you know, someone comes up and they said, we did this particular project in my class where we had to write a persuasive letter to a politician or something like that. So you say, oh, it sounds like you were engaged in that. You know, why were you so engaged? Again, when you're using any kind of discussion questions, it's really good to repeat the student's answer. Summarize it if you can. So if they say that they went through this big long thing, maybe they talk for about a minute or so about how they wrote to politicians and, talk to them about food or whatever it was to increase food safety or gun rights or whatever it was. You say, oh, so you wrote a letter to, you had to write a persuasive letter to one of your senators or someone in the governmental office. So sounds like you were engaged in that. Why were you so engaged? Can you talk a little bit about that? So really draw on that for them as they go through it. So why are we so interested in problem-based learning, or why do we think that it is, potentially so fantastic? So let's look at this one study from the National Science Foundation that was commissioned in 2014. And its title is Enough with the Lecturing. So I think that's probably pretty straightforward. Again, this was conducted in a higher education setting. It was not conducted in a K-12 setting, but I'm assuming that the findings can be applied to K-12. So let's learn a little bit about what they found out. So basically, when students are involved in active learning, here are some things that we noticed. There was increased participation. There's increased problem solving, meaning that they were, able to solve more difficult problems. The increased exam rates by half letter grade or more, and that was 6%. And a lot of these students were at the cusp of failing. So you'll notice here there was, when they looked at different classes and directly compared them, in the lecturing type courses, 34% of those students were failing, whereas in the classes with at least some active learning, it didn't have to be all active learning the entire time, but just even some, even one unit, 22% of students failed. So that's quite a dramatic difference there. What stands out to me from that particular article is it's intuitively true that we know as learners when we're involved and engaged, we put a lot more effort into the process. And even a little bit will make a difference. So based on the study, even when they made one unit that was more active based, it made a difference in students' engagement, participation, problem solving, and even their letter grades, their learning. One of the money quotes from the lead author was, "We've got to stop killing student performance and interest in science by lecturing and instead help them think." So I want you to really take that into consideration within this particular week is how are you going to get your students to think? To not just regurgitate information, but really think and apply what you're teaching them. You're in this particular subject area or grade level because you really are passionate about the topic area, or you're really passionate about your students' grade level, or whatever it is that makes you want to be a teacher. You want your students to be able to think, process, take the things that you're giving them, be able to apply it to a broader context, to their lives. So continue to think about this all the time as you're going through your own education. In any content area, it's critical, right? And one way we can do this is through problem-based learning. It's not the only active learning method, but it's one of the ones that we're going to talk about today. So based on your responses in the class prep, I know a lot of you talked about the roles of students and teachers. I want you to turn to your elbow partner and brainstorm a few different things that you can put here underneath students and teachers. What are the different things? And go ahead and enter that into your Nearpod. Okay. Now that they've done that, you can go through the different things and you can add these different things. I might write the different pieces on the board that are in the note section. So maybe you want to print up your notes to make sure that you cover all those different things. I wouldn't spend too much time on this because you've got to get to their videos. This is just a comparison chart. And a typical question in a typical classroom might be like, apply these concepts, or what were the 5 reasons for the Civil War? Or it could sometimes be like in the form of a project. So these are common, like represent your knowledge here. I want you to show me that you know how to apply this, or make a diorama of something. So it could be something that just basically showcases their knowledge. But a PBL question asks them to make a judgment and define their judgment. Why do you think that? Why do you think that this should happen as opposed to this happening? Or it asks them to design and build something and test it. So this is just a reminder of the way that problem-based learning or inquiry-based learning is different from traditional education. So why use PBL? One of the reasons why we advocate using problem-based learning or PBL is because it allows students to take control of their own learning. Again, when they're making a judgment, that they have to think about it for themselves. Why do they think one way? Why is this important, or why should they approach it this way? So let's make an example, or let's see an example on this. And so this example is from an undergraduate biomedical engineering class. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, I want to teach kindergarten, or oh, I want to teach middle school. Why are you showing me an undergraduate biomedical engineering class? So the thing I want you to pay attention to here is really about what the teacher's role is and what the student's role is. You know, we just talked about this a little while ago when we were talking about the students and the teacher. I want you to pay attention to not the content and not other sorts of things, but I want you to pay attention to the way the teacher describes his expectations of students and the ways that students engage in what's being asked of them. The context is not going to be as relevant. The point is to think about how students are engaged in what's being asked of them. So, and just to give you a little bit of background information, these are juniors and seniors at the University of El Paso, or University of Texas in El Paso, and it's a Hispanic serving institution, which means that over 50% enrolled in the institution identify as Hispanic. And the reason why this is important is because this particular institution provides access to students who normally wouldn't have access. So it's a lot of first-generation students. They tend to take longer because they're working full-time. It's a high-need population of students. So this is not your typical high-achieving engineers. These are underserved students that haven't been well-served by the United States education system because they come from a higher-need background. But what's interesting about this is that the professor has high expectations for his students to think about things. And then the other interesting thing is how well his students do. So I really want you to pay attention to this, and we've used this with a lot of different teachers, elementary and secondary, and they're able to grab out the different relevant parts because they see how this applies to just learning in kids in general. All right, so after you've done that, you can ask them what they saw from that. Did you see the high expectations from the professor? How did you see it? What, you know, provide me with some context here. All right, so now let's talk about what the students experience. All right, so ignore all the technical information. So before you watch this video, ignore all the technical information. You're not looking for their technical knowledge. I want you to really think about, how do you know that they're engaged? So we're going to see a video of one segment of one team's presentation. So you play the video, play the video. Then after the video, ask, what did you notice? What did you see students experiencing? How did they talk about their learning? What do they think is important? Do you get the sense that they know what they're talking about? For instance, they talked about their failure. We're helping them to see, ignore what's not relevant, and consider this as an example where students are taking charge of their own learning. So ask them to think about when they were in previous K-12 situations, what might be different here? What versus what they experienced? Okay, so now let's go into the elements of PBL. You had to read that article. Who can remember the 4 main elements of PBL? Call on different people. Hopefully everybody gets all these different areas. You can write these 4 areas down. So exactly right here, let's just go over them one more time. So the first one was coming up with a big problem, right? And we use the term ill-structured to characterize 2 main elements. First of all, that there's not one correct solution, nor is there a single solution path. The authentic and realistic problem is one of the most important aspects of PBL, as it both introduces the context and sets the motivational platform. The second piece is the authentic assessment, and one requirement in PBL is that students should propose a solution or a response to the proposed problem. Students should respond to the problem posed with an evidence-based argument that conveys their position and understanding regarding, for example, the safety of their food. The assessment could take multiple forms, such as writing a report, a white paper, presentation, debate, policy recommendation, letter to an editor. It's similar. Whatever it is, the authentic and culminating activity provides an avenue for communicating their learning, as well as an audience for doing so, even if that audience doesn't necessarily extend beyond the other teams in their setting. The third one was collaboration. It's both a collaborative process among the team members, the teachers, and other community members or stakeholders as well, if that's relevant. And finally, the expert facilitation and scaffolding. And this is where it becomes really, as a teacher, your role here is to really support your students, helping them to make having realistic expectations for different types of students. It's important to remember the numerous challenges learners are faced with in PBL, both setting and attaining meaningful goals, gathering and enlisting resources, monitoring their own progress, which you may have to help them do, especially for those that aren't very self-directed in their own learning, building knowledge and making decisions. So all of those things are critically important. There are 2 different kind of approaches in PBL. The first one is dilemma problems, and these are like the judgment questions, right? So we want them to make a judgment or a decision. So for example, when should we use personal genetic information to make decisions? Right? So those could be different. So and here are some different example stems here. So what are the laws, guidelines, or policies that should govern blah? Another great question that sometimes comes up is, were the colonists justified in taking action against the British government? For U.S. history types of questions. The question that we're going to be asking you later is, should there be a meat tax, a tax on meat? Or people have also asked a fat tax. Should there be a tax on fatty foods? So thinking about some kind of an ill-structured problem, again, that there's no solution that's going to be acceptable to everybody, and there's no one way to get there. The next one is another ill-structured problem, but this one is a design. So you're actually making something. So you're testing something out. So like this one, the example that you read in the article about an aquaponics system, trying to figure out if we can do self-sustained food areas. Or like this one, what is a kitchen solution for the needs of elderly individuals with arthritis? Other questions are like, how do I make a new cast for someone that they can use? And they're actually starting to 3D print casts, so that was a cool solution that somebody came up with. So thinking about a design problem that they can go with. Here's the problem-based learning cycle. So you start off with presenting some kind of a problem. to your students. You have them work together as a team, and you can mini lecture as needed. So if you need to talk about different things, so for example, in the aquaponics one, they talk to them about different things like oxygen, or how we might, what are the needs of fish versus the needs of plants. How could we possibly design something in order to do that? Students collaborate and work together. They also discuss as a team. They prepare some kind of a solution. There may be some kind of a whole class discussion or reflection as needed to say, okay, what was going on, what happened. And then assessment or final presentation. And in this, it's an ongoing thing here, right? Collaborating work, team discussion. Collaboration, work, team discussion. Same thing here with the assessment. And so where does technology fit in? So technology can be involved in a lot of different ways. So first of all, it could be a way for teachers to present the content in articles or hooks or videos. We do that a lot in this class, right? Where we show you a video or to get you excited about a topic or to illustrate something that's going on. As a resource for student investigation or content exploration, so having them look up evidence or finding examples or doing observations. There are a lot of different ways you can do that. It could be used as a resource for productivity. So we've used it just this past week in terms of productivity. They could be using Evernote to take all their different notes, or Google Docs, or journaling through a blog, different assignments that way. Or finally, as a resource for student production. So having them create a video or a Prezi or Canva like infographic or whatever it is that they want to teach to. So that's just basically an overview of that part of it. I want you to fill out an exit ticket. What I might also do is, if I end up having enough time, which I think I might have enough time, I might also integrate the things that I was not able to last week, which is looking at the ISTE standards. So I might add that into here just to make sure. But before they leave, have them fill out this emoji exit ticket, and then check in about their service learning. You can see if they've heard from their teachers yet. Maybe I would keep a document that actually has check marks so that you know what stage they're in. And before coming to your class next week, have them read the assigned perspectives for the meat text. So they all have to read Citizen 1 and 2 and assign them to these different A, B, C, or D before they leave your class. For those of you that have the 3-hour class, just make sure that you allow them to have some time to read in class. All right, that's it.